Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And today we're talking about how to pick your next game.
And what do you mean by that?
Everybody is playing a game, either a short series of adventures or a long campaign, and it ends, right? All things come to an end sooner or later. So then you have options as to what kind of game you're going to play next or who's going to run the next game.
Sometimes, if there's more than one person that runs a game.
Right. Yeah, this is basically for people who have people in their group who can run games or like to run games. And you have choices, right? Now, if you're in a group that has only been playing AD&D 2nd edition for the past 30 years, this probably isn't for you. But if you like mixing it up and
although it might be, because then you might be able to play something else.
Well, that's true too, but usually people who play those games for such a long period of time, they only play one game. And there's some people who only play D&D. It is quite stunning for people like me who play quite a few different games or like looking at different games.
And have bought thousands of games.
I wouldn't say thousands. So a lot depends on the group that you play with, right? Luckily for us, me and Jolene, we're at least in two groups. There are multiple GMs in those groups, right? And that's the whole point of those groups is to rotate the GMs, rotate the games. So one goal was to actually get to play some of these games on my shelf. Jolene's eyeballing the shelves. And the other is to see what other games have to offer as far as mechanics. And, we just want to play in a different genre. Some people like modern games to deal with spies and thrillers and stuff like that, and mysteries, and science fiction. A lot of people love science fiction. Star Wars, Star Trek, are huge favorites in our household. So it seems to me only natural that people would want to play different types of games. So luckily for us, we have quite a few people in our group that are more than willing to run a game. Like our Friday night group, we rotate. Well, we kind of a little bit draconian. We started letting everybody run their game, but then, some games took longer than others, so we set a hard session limit of 3 sessions per game.
By we mean one of our friends did this.
Shower name shameless. Yes. Yeah, and I think the reason is that we didn't want to get stuck playing this, not stuck, but running in one game over and over again, and other GMs wanted to play different games or have a shot at running games that they have in their library or games that they were really interested in. For us, luckily we have that group, and we have a group that's very open to running games. I mean, we have different players who are willing to take up the GM mantle, so that's pretty neat. And then on our Saturday group, it was always meant to be one.
This is Saul's Saturday group. It's not actually my Saturday group.
You're playing in it.
Yes, I am.
So it was started as a in-player face-to-face group, and we were playing in nearby Palo Alto.
That was in the before times.
Yes, in the before COVID-19 times, and it was really fun, and we really liked rotating the games, and we didn't really have a set way or time. Usually they were considered one shots or one adventure, and sometimes the one adventure would last maybe 2, 3, 4 sessions. But in that face-to-face game, we played a little bit longer. We played from like 10 to 2, 3, 4. So the sessions were much longer than the Friday group, because the Friday group is online and we only play for like 4 hours max.
Because we're in different places, and some people have to get up early to go to work, and they're in 2 hours ahead of us.
Yeah, we're in different time zones, and that's another reason why we started the Friday night group, because we were playing. I wanted to play with people that had left the area and were no longer local. We're lucky, right? We're lucky that we have these groups that have people who are willing to GM on a consistent basis. These two groups, we each run a game, and then we pass it on, right? Whatever game we want to run. And a lot of times what I do is I give like people an option of like 3 games.
No, not 3 games. He gives you an option of like 2,000 games, and then somebody chooses something different.
Yeah, there's that, right? So it was the reason I wanted. Like I said, the whole reason I started these groups was because I wanted to try these games that I had recently bought, or some of these games I had bought a long time ago, and They just never saw the gaming table. And so I think that was critical for me, is that we all play, we all GM, and we all put out the different games.
Because somebody was telling him that he has all these games and why are they here?
Who was that person?
That was me.
So at least I could say, hey, I played this game instead of just reference material, which quite a few of them are. But it was fun, right? It was fun having these different games hit the table, and I got to experience a lot of different games. It's kind of like when you go to a convention over a weekend, you can pick different games that you never played before. And I think that's one of the pluses of conventions, and this is one of the pluses of this type of rotating GMs groups that we have. So how do you pick the game that's going to be next? Well, in our group, we don't have the long campaign game that we sort of do, because we have a third group that we play on Sundays. The Sundays, seems like Sunday's a campaign day, because Sunday our games are much longer. They deal with campaigns, and they deal with longer or really long sets of adventures. When we play on Saturday and Friday, those groups, usually the person who is next in one group is not as organized as the other, right? One group says, "Oh, who wants to run next?" "Okay, I will." "What do you have?" "Oh, can run this, or I can run that." And and people choose, and we send emails back and forth. It's kind of informal. While the Friday night group, we have this role of who's next on the list, right? And you
can choose to pass.
You can choose to pass, yes. Yeah, and the list is it just has everybody in the group that plays, and it just rotates, right?
I think that one of the reasons that it is the way it is because Saul always wants to run a game, right? And other people wanted to run too, so they had to curtail him.
Probably the reason that is because I have so many games I want to see hit the table. So if I can control the changing of that, because other people just want to play games that we've already played in, and that's completely fine and it's fun. But I want to get games that are on my shelf to see if they work or if they're fun or whatever.
So, but it's most interesting because his friend asked him, "What do you want? What do you want me to run for you?" And he told him some steampunk apocalyptic game or something.
It was funny because I said I want to. I go, what do you want to? He says, what do you want to play in? He must listen to our podcast or something, because I don't know. Maybe I say that I want to play certain games and I don't get to play them. So he asked me straight up. He goes, well, what genres do you want to play? I go, well, I really like post-apocalyptic games, or the genre. I'm really interested in that. I don't know why. And I really like steampunk games, right? I think steampunks are pretty. The setting, the genre, whatever you want to call it, is pretty neat. Even though there's huge differences on what you consider steampunk. Like steampunk can be just Victorian era, no magic kind of thing, or it could be, all out, like fantasy dwarves, elves, minotaurs, magic in a Victorian era steam age setting. So it runs quite a bit of a genre there. Out of the blue, he I think he texted me or emailed me. He goes, have you heard of this game called Airship Pirates? Right? I go, yeah, I have heard of it. And he goes, it's great because it mixes both post-apocalyptic and steampunk, right? the two genres that I wanted to play in.
And Saul pulls it off of his shelf.
No, well, before that, he goes, do you own the game? I go, oh, yeah, I do. And he goes, do you own it in print or PDF? I go, both. And what the funny thing is, my friend lives in Portland, Oregon. And the first time we went to Portland, Oregon to visit them all, Jolene has family in Washington, right across the river. And so we went there and we all visited this place called Guardian Games. Now this is there's a Guardian Games there now, but it's still the same game place, but its location had moved. So this one was more like nearer the river, it was more of an industrial type.
Is that when Simona went with us?
Yes, Simona. Well, we went to that ice cream place. Remember
that?
Yeah. It was sold ice cream.
And then we went to the game store.
And then we went to the game store, right? Which was like right in some like old dock area. And it was a great place. They have like this large place to play, and they even have like a place where adults could go and drink and stuff like that. Kind of like a pub idea. Anyway, so
which is a great idea, by the way.
What was that, like 10 years ago?
At least.
And so I bought Airship Pirates when I was there, right?
Because
And,
he can't go into a gaming store without buying a role-playing game.
well, I took advantage of Oregon's no sales tax policy, right?
Any excuse, my friend. Any excuse.
I say 7.84%. So I bought it, and I read it. I was really fascinated with it, and I never got to play it. I never got to run it.
And now he's going to get someone to run it for him.
It's even better. That's a way of, I don't know what I call it, but because I think people who run games a lot like me, sometimes we get into this rut about, we talked about it, the GM dad who runs games all the time. I also have a lot of games on my list that I want to try. And it was funny because I put out like 3 games I wanted to run, and everybody was talking about the games, and there's 6, 7 people in our group, and people were saying, "Oh, I want to try this game. Oh, I think this one would be interesting." And out of the blue, Jolene ignores the list that I had and says, "Feng Shui. I want to play Feng Shui." And I don't know what kind of poor, wily ways the woman has, but everybody goes, "Oh yeah, we'll all play Feng Shui. That's the game we want to play."
He was very upset about that, by the way.
Because it wasn't on the list.
I think Sippy suggested it.
I don't remember. Anyway, I don't even know where it came from, actually. And it's fine. I love Feng Shui, and I have not really.
And I got to play Feng Shui.
And I really haven't run Feng Shui 2nd edition. I haven't got to play that one, which is substantially different from the 1st edition.
Well, I don't know how other groups are, but the Friday night group is full of a bunch of GMs. These are guys that have been playing since the 1970s or 1980s.
Most of the 80s, I think.
Well, because the very end of the 70s, maybe very beginning of the 80s.
Yeah. I don't know how early Mike and those guys started playing, but probably wasn't as early as me because I was influenced by Felipe.
Well, yeah.
Who was influenced or was exposed to it in high school, and I'm not sure that Mike and those people were playing at that time, but shortly after.
Yes.
Like 1980, junior high.
So these guys have been playing for a long time, and they all have run games for
Right.
for different people or different groups.
Right.
And they really enjoy playing, and they know almost everything, and I don't need to worry about knowing all the rules because someone will tell me, or they'll argue about it. Either way.
So so picking a new game for us is just really,
it's what they want to run, what people want to play,
right.
what they enjoy, and so it makes it really nice. But I know some groups aren't like that, where some groups only play D&D, but that doesn't mean that the same person has to run the campaign.
Right.
Maybe you give it to somebody else, or maybe somebody in your group wants to try a different game. So this would be a good time when your current game ends to let them have a shot at it,
right.
or to suggest other people run a game. I did that with our Sunday group, which I got no takers, but that's okay. I also put out a game saying I'll run Feng Shui because I was playing in it, and I thought, oh, this would be cool, and I know some of them have already played in it, but I got no takers on that email either. So I told Saul, we'll see what happens. If you're listening, Jason, it's okay. Saul will run Shadowrun sooner or later.
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't get people to pick up the mantle to go and do the GM.
Oh, in this case, you're picking up the mantle to do the GM, but nobody's picked up the playing mantle, right?
Yeah.
I think that is just some people, some groups even have a problem with responding to email, right? It just happens. That's why, when I've told stories about when I first started running games, again, with people other than the people I usually did back in 2001 when I started the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms campaign that I ran. It was like, does anybody want to do this? Does anybody want to pick a pre-established setting? That was the first big question that I wanted, because I wanted to go buy a setting and I wasn't sure I wanted to come up with my own. Like my brother had, his Cardoza campaign, which, I had some revelations about it just the other day. But
revelations, you mean?
Revelation? What did I say?
Revelations.
Remember, English is my second language.
That's a joke, by the way.
Yes, yeah. It's not really a second language. But sorry for people if I confused you this whole time. It was funny because he was talking about his campaign, and I didn't want to go through the hassle of creating a world from scratch. At the time, I was still going to school. I was, busy, and it was just something I didn't want to do. And I figured, well, if I could just buy a campaign setting, it would just eliminate a lot of problems. So there was the World of Greyhawk, which was still in first edition. I don't think they ever came out with the second edition rules. Maybe they did, but they certainly didn't do it for third edition and haven't since. Though there's rumors they're coming out with a new campaign setting. There was Dragonlance and there was Forgotten Realms that I could buy. And on a whim, I just picked Forgotten Realms, And so I set it in Cormier, in that area. And that was just me doing that because I had polled the group by email. I said, hey, does anybody have any preferences to what world we should, buy, if we want to buy one, or should we make our own? And the response was zilch, right? Nothing. No responses at all. Jolene, this is like her first time. Maybe not her first time, but this is the first time that she's sent an email to a bunch of people and got very little response back. To which I say, it's not like they don't like your game or they don't like your idea. Is that people sometimes are very unresponsive to email. So what I developed in response to the no responses for emails, I would just email bomb people, right? I would send emails constantly, and that was my tact. And then either they would get tired of me sending them emails, which I was totally fine with, and actually respond because that's what I wanted, or they would get angry and say, stop sending me so many emails. I go, well, just answer my question. And so, maybe I trained them wrong, right? Because when I was running that game, and I was the GM dad, and I was saying, okay, are we going to meet this Friday? Are we going to play this Friday? Are we going to skip this Friday? Who can make it? A lot of times they wouldn't respond to that first email. So I would just, every day for if it was 2 weeks out, I would wait every other day. And then as the time grew closer, I'd start emailing them sometimes twice a day. So maybe I trained them wrong. But people, I don't know what it is about emails. People either they read them and they go, oh, I got to respond to this. I don't have time right now. And then they forget about them.
There's a new technology now. It's called texting.
There is texting. And you were telling me that younger people really like texting instead of emails.
Yeah, they don't like you to call them on the phone. They want you to text them.
Well, I don't mind. And the whole reason I switched to, instead of calling people, was because I always thought it was less intrusive, right? Because when you call somebody, you may be interrupting them when they're doing something important, or maybe waking up their kid when they're trying to put them to sleep or whatever. And where emails, they can read it at their own time and they can respond at their own time. But it's almost like it's too easy to forget. And text messages, I think, are a little bit, they're more immediate, and your phone buzzes, right? Whatever you have it on. And then they're more inclined to respond to a text. And that's true too, because like I have the alternate Western game that I run, and I may send emails to Teo and Adrian, but in a text, they usually respond in much quicker chances of response. So back to choosing the game, right? So luckily, me and Jolene have these two groups that have multiple GMs. But in our longer campaign, right, the Sunday game, Jolene was running D&D, I was running D&D, and I switched from D&D to Shadowrun, and after I was done with Shadowrun, because Shadowrun's a difficult game to run, and because the rules are so complex and there's so many things to remember, and I find D&D much easier to run.
But we're not actually done with it, because you stopped running it in the middle of a very important dragon scene, and
it was a bit of a cliffhanger.
and then things happened. It was the 2020 year.
Well, we were meeting in person.
Yes.
And then COVID hit, right?
Yes.
And then COVID was like, well, we'll see each other in a couple months, that kind of thing.
And that hasn't happened.
Unfortunately, it has not happened.
It's October now, and
October.
And so, because people were like going, I haven't got to see you, I went ahead and did the D&D on Roll20 with them, but they really want to do the Shadowrun, but Saul's running too many games currently to stop and do it. So.
Yes, which is kind of interesting, because the way the rotation fell. I was running Feng Shui for Friday night, and I think it's almost my turn to run on the Saturday group, and I have my long campaign on Sunday, my alternate Western game. So Jolene's all, there's no way you're going to be running 3 games over three days. And I'm like, yeah, that might be a little bit too taxing. So luckily, other people stepped up and ran on Saturday. I think when you have such a large group of people who are willing to run and play games, I think that's the best way. But if you don't, if you're, if like on the Sunday group, a lot of people aren't comfortable running for whatever reason, and so the main,
well, one of them Saul broke, so
that did not break. So you want to give some context about that. We ran a huge 3-table, 3 GM game at a con a couple of years ago, probably more like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And though it went really well, one of the GMs had a really tough time. That was our friend Steve, and Jolene says we broke him because it was really stressful for him. And I admit that it was like his first GMing gig that he did
at a convention,
and it was his first GMing gig at a convention. And some of his players weren't the nicest players.
Oh, he got the most horrible
table. He got
the
worst ones, right?
The rules lawyers.
Right. What's funny is as soon as they came to my table, the rules lawyers, that aspect of the rules lawyerish went away. But I have maybe a little stronger personality. But it doesn't matter. Where was I going? So the long campaign, I was running Shadowrun, and then I was running D&D, and then Shadowrun came up, and it was a one-shot. I was just going to run over one shot. It was over. Oh, it was
a New Year's Day.
New Year's Day
Eve
game
thing, yeah.
And what's funny is that Jolene was I think I shared this a long time ago, but Jolene usually likes to play only like 4 or 5 hours because then she gets tired, and we get tired of sitting down. So we had started pretty early because I wanted.
It was New Year's Eve.
It was New Year's Eve, so we started around noon. I figured we stop around 5 because that's a 5-hour limit.
But they were so excited. I couldn't say I was tired, but I couldn't say, "Oh no, stop."
So it was funny because we were playing, and 5 o'clock rolls around, and then like, okay, guys, I think this would be a good place to stop. And then like Jolene, who was across the table to me, kind of gives me a weird look. She goes, "We can't stop now." I'm like, well, it's been 5 hours. We've been playing 5 hours. He goes, no. And I think we ended up playing till like 9 or 10, which was cool because we spent all day. But
we just ordered dinner.
It was funny. So I was the main person running the 5th edition game at the time, and then I switched to that one shot, and they enjoyed it so much. They go, "Oh, can we play again? Can we keep playing?" And I was kind of caught off guard because I wasn't really expecting to run a campaign. And I go, sure. And then I really like almost bit off more than I could chew because that game is massively complex. And so on a one shot, I could flub a lot of stuff, right? But as the group, as the players got more and more into the game and actually went out and bought the book and read the rules, they were really starting to get technical as to what the rules were. And I was like,
But it's good. You like it.
Yeah, I love the genre. I've always liked Shadowrun. I'm the GM dad in that group, and then Jolene felt pity on me and says, "I'll help, give you a little bit of slack time," and she ran an adventure, the Mad Mage, which I thought was really neat.
I ran an adventure before that too.
And she ran. Oh, that's right. You ran an adventure, and then she ran the Mad Mage, and I thought they were both good games. And the Mad Mage was strange because I could tell that she was uncomfortable with the whole situation,
It was a dungeon.
The mega dungeon.
I've never been in Saul doesn't run dungeons, so it was my first experience in a dungeon.
So some elements of the dungeon were really interesting, and I thought that was really neat. And other times it was just too mechanical, and I think that's what killed it for you, right? The mechanical, let's go to the next room and kill everything and take their stuff. In that case, when somebody is always the GM and runs the game, I think as a group, if you're in that kind of group and you're a player, I would say give it a shot. Tell your GM that you're willing to, like, you know what, let me run a game. I'm really interested in running the game. I want to learn the ropes. Ask them for tips or her tips about what they would do or how they run or how they, what their modus operandi is how do they do the running of the game, especially if you like the way they run the game. And then go from there. And I think, one, you alleviate a little bit of a problem from, not a problem, but a little bit, give the GM a break.
Give the GM a break, yeah.
And you get to, you get to learn something about what it takes to be behind that GM screen, though most people don't use GM screens these days. And I think that's a good way of being in a group and making sure your group lasts. Because I know there's GMs out there who they love running games and they'll run forever. And that's cool. But I think it'd be nice to give them a break. And it'd be nice for players to pick up the mantle and say, I want to run a game. And, even if it's a one-shot or a 2-session adventure or whatever, or even a different genre, that would be interesting for your group. Even though they might resist it, I think if you say, well, Laura's been running for the last 3 years, and I want to give her a break, and I want to try out this new game. That's what I would do, just to mix it up a little bit, keep it interesting. And then even if your game, is terrible, you're going to go back to Laura's game, and everybody's going to be happy.
Yeah, your game probably won't be terrible.
No, I wouldn't expect it to be terrible. Picking the game. A lot of times when us as GMs are presenting the game, a lot of times we, depending on what we want to run, we have to sell the game, right? We have to well, this is the game I want to run and this is why I want to run it. And I think if you give a good
pitch.
Good pitch, exactly. A good pitch. People will say, well, Saul's really interested in this game. He seems excited to play and run the game. So, yeah, I'm not all that interested in that genre, but I'll give it a shot. Or like my friend who isn't really interested in playing Traveler, you might get people go, well, you know what? That game really doesn't do it for me. I'll sit out. It's no big deal. I can do something else on Sunday night or Friday night or whatever it is. And don't take it as a hit. Don't take it as a what?
Don't take it personally.
Right. Don't take it personally. Don't take it as saying something bad about you. He just doesn't like the game. And I can understand that because I was kind of in the same boat years ago. But me, I'm more willing to try anything more than once.
Well, I tried Traveler. It was interesting.
Well, it's a very old game, right? And the version we played was the original Little Black Books, right? So it was very Mongoose did a second edition, which they rewrote the rules, and I think it's presented a little bit better, the mechanics and all that stuff.
All I know is that in the middle of the adventure, everybody stopped because they had to have an argument about the rules. And then they actually got to they went to the Mongoose version of the rules, and they said that nobody actually knew what those rules meant. And I just thought it was
supposed to be interpreted, right?
I thought it was hilarious because I was sitting there for 30 minutes going, you guys are arguing about stuff, and then somebody wasn't there for the first argument. And it wasn't really an argument, it was just a discussion about.
Well, it was an interpretation of the rules, right? And that's the problem of early and even some modern games, right? That the rules are... It's
a problem for all games, especially board games.
Oh, God, yes. Well, let's not get into discussion about rules and interpretations. But that was, and that happened in a kind of in a different way. Anyway, we shouldn't get to that. The interruptions in
Sorry.
Interruptions in role-playing games.
Sorry.
But, that's something you don't want to happen is this, let's open the books and let's read, what the rules are.
Well, but one of the things when you're playing games like that, older games, a lot of people have played in them before, and so they have how they did it before. But if you haven't done it for 30 years, then it might be hard to remember exactly how you did it back then.
Ultimately, I think
it's up to the GM.
It's probably a different subject, but ultimately you have to trust each other, right?
Yeah.
As a player and as a GM. And I think one of the OSR things is rulings over rules, right?
Yeah.
Even if you get a rule wrong, I've done this before, especially in Shadowrun. I go, look, you gotta trust me that I'm not out to kill you or I'm not out to screw you as far as the rules are concerned. But in order to keep the game flowing and moving, I'm gonna rule it this way. After the game, you guys can spend all the time you want and look it up, and then come back to me and say, see, this is what the rules say, this is what it should have been like, and then boom, we can go from there. But what you don't want is the rules discussion
at the table.
Yeah, stopping the game, and then you're like, okay, so 3 people are arguing about the rules, and the other 3 people are there listening to you argue or have a discussion.
So, but that makes it interesting when you're picking games, right? Because you never know what people are going to pick, and you get to play all kinds of different games. If you are in more than one group that plays more than one game.
Yeah, that's why I like playing games nobody else has, because then they don't have the rules and they can't argue the rules with me.
That's not true because you share the rules with them.
Well, sometimes I do, but sometimes some people don't read the rules and they just grab the pre-generated character and they run with it, which is cool.
Yeah, some of us are a little more busy than other people.
So how do you pick your next game? It all depends on the type of group that you have and why your group plays games, right? If you're in that long campaign, that Laura's been running for the last 3 years and it ends. That's amazing because we don't really run a lot of long campaigns. Well, we did. We ran Storm King's Thunder, and that lasted a year and a half.
You did that,
Right? So in that sense, that is a huge decision when you're looking at starting another campaign, and I think that one is a little bit more. Everybody has to discuss what they want to do, make characters together, and it's going to be a long haul kind of game. A little bit easier to choose a game when you're running a group like what we have is where we're rotating GMs, we're rotating games, and we only run 3 or 4 sessions and switch games because that's what we do. And picking that next game could be either something you've always wanted to try or something you've played back when you were young, like Traveler. We played that when we were back in the 80s. And it's kind of, this nostalgic look back at the rules and stuff like that. And that's pretty cool. Or it could be a brand new game that you've never played and want to try it out. So when you pick that next game, it all depends on the group. Luckily for me, there's 3 groups that I run in. 2 are like rotating GMs and 1 is a longer type of game. And a lot of that is because people really like the game. People really like 5th edition. So I've been running 5th edition for a while. And people now all of a sudden like Shadowrun. And I love Shadowrun. I love the world. The rules a little clunky, chunky, crunchy,
but that's okay.
A lot of the rules are player facing, I like to say.
We'll let him say that because I don't know what it means, but that's okay. Don't explain it to me now. So good luck picking a new game. Give it a shot. Try something new. Give your GM a break. Run something for them. There you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.
Mm-hmm.